Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Love Jones Cohort, Single and Living Alone in the Black Middle Class, by Kris Marsh, narrated by Janina Edwards. Preface. I am a black woman who is SALA, the acronym I coined for Single and Living Alone, that is, without a significant other or romantic partner. I also use SALA to refer to those who are single adults living alone. I am a university professor, researcher, and businesswoman. I am friendly, bubbly, and outgoing, and I recently took up golf as a hobby. I acknowledge that I hold several privileges. I am cisgendered, heterosexual, able-bodied, Christian, a U.S. citizen, and a native English speaker with an androgynous name and 3C natural hair texture. According to the Pew Research Center's Are You in the American Middle Class interactive calculator, I am in the upper income tier, a category that 32% of adults in the Washington, D.C. area, where I live, and 19% in the United States as a whole fall into. Taking into consideration my education, race, and marital status among all American adults sharing the same demographics, 23% are lower income, less than $48,500. 56% are middle income, between $48,500 and $145,500, and 21% are upper income, greater than $145,500. According to the authors of the interactive calculator, the middle class is defined as your size-adjusted household income and the cost of living in your area are the factors we use to determine your income tier. Middle-income households, those with an income that is two-thirds to double the U.S. median household income, had incomes ranging from about Z, all figures computed for three-person households, adjusted for the cost of living in a metropolitan area, and expressed in 2018 dollars. In 2018, the national middle annual income range was about $48,500 to $145,500 for a household of three. Lower-income households had incomes less than $48,500, and upper-income households had incomes greater than $145,500, incomes in 2018 dollars. Unlike the Pew Research Center's calculator, sociologist Karen Lacey and others, looking specifically at the black middle class, employ a lower, middle, core, and upper-class typology. Professionally and personally, I prefer not to make those same demarcations. Yet, to be sensitive to the variability in the black middle class, in this book I use the term middle class to signify the middle class and beyond to capture class variance. In 2002, my two sisters and I purchased a home in Leimert Park, a black suburban area in Los Angeles County, California. This area experienced, and is still going through, gentrification. In 2011, 75% of residents were black. By 2019, this had fallen to 65%. Yes, 3 grown women lived in one house together. It was an adventure for the ages. I only lasted 3 years with them, but my two sisters went on to live together for more than 15 years. During the time I lived there, a single woman and a single man, each living alone with neither siblings nor housemates, purchased homes on our street. The demographic shift on our street resonated with me as a graduate student studying the subfields of the black family and demography in the Department of Sociology at the University of Southern California. The anecdotal and demographic changes I saw on my street were not apparent in the literature I was reading in graduate school. This continued to be the case as I became more immersed in the demographic and sociological literature, leading me to uncover a quandary that I felt was worth exploring. The demographic literature was clear. While marriage rates were declining for all racial and ethnic groups, this trend was even more pronounced for black adults. In terms of the sociological literature on the black middle class, some scholars were suggesting that the continued employment of both members of a black married couple is required to maintain middle-class status. Thus, in their writings, it was explicitly posited that declining marriage rates may result in a shrinking black middle class, with the implicit assumption being that the black middle class and marriage are intrinsically connected. Something, it seemed to me, was amiss in the social science literature. Fast forward to 2019, when it could be seen that 45% of Black women and men in the U.S. had never been married. I began to intellectually unpack a compositional shift in the Black middle class away from married couples to SALA households. Though there has been considerable recent research on and coverage of singlehood, and more generally, burgeoning research on the Black middle class, little of it has addressed Black adults who are both SALA and Black middle class. The Love Jones Cohort, Single and Living Alone in the Black Middle Class, examines the lifestyle of SALAs as members of the Black middle class. Utilizing a constellation of social science literature, as well as extensive personal insights from this demographic group, this book sheds light on the state of class and singlehood in Black America. In doing so, the Love Jones Cohort unapologetically focuses on Black single adults in the middle class. Neither white singleness nor comparing the Black middle class to the white middle class is my area of concern here. Instead, the book offers an alternative vantage point from which to examine the heterogeneity of the Black American and, specifically, the Black middle class experience. Throughout, the core theme is understanding how the intersecting identities of race, class, gender, and singleness inform the lifestyle choices of the Love Jones Cohort. This book suggests that members of the Love Jones Cohort are innovators, paving the way for others to navigate, survive, and thrive as middle-class and never-married adults. Put another way, the book questions whether singlehood has become easier and more accessible to everyone because of the Love Jones Cohort showing the rest of the world how it can be done. In the past 15 years alone, there have been several noteworthy books and countless articles studying various aspects of the Black middle class and Black elites in America, including scholarship from across the globe. Similarly, various books have examined notions of growing singlehood among all racial and ethnic groups. Even so, little of the scholarship has focused exclusively on the never-married Black middle class, or just Black singles, or on college-educated and professional Black women's dating practices, challenges, and work-family balance. The Love Jones Cohort draws on these previously published works to understand just how unique the singlehood experience and lifestyle of a SALA is in the Black middle class. Throughout my scholarly career researching Black middle class SALAs, my primary focus has been to move beyond the omnipresent inquiries: why are Black women not getting married? And why are there so many single professional Black women? This line of questioning places the spotlight on Black women's individual dating practices, while often ignoring the structural factors undergirding such choices, constraints, and decision-making processes. It implies a deficiency on the part of Love Jones Cohort members, specifically Black women, due to the fact that they are unmarried and child-free. As for myself, I am constantly asked why I am not married, and/or whether my research can explain why so many other Black professional women remain unmarried. I recall an incident in December 2015 at a winter bazaar in a gated community in Prince George's County at the home of a Black SALA physician. I was presenting my work alongside two other panelists, one a dating and relationship expert and the other a financial planner. The dating expert spoke first, I spoke second, and the financial manager spoke third. Given that I was speaking after the dating expert, my aim was to move the conversation beyond dating to discuss other aspects of being SALA, such as the friendship networks and processes for acquiring and disseminating wealth, which would then lay the groundwork for the wealth manager. I therefore opened my talk by announcing something along the lines of, let's switch gears and extend the conversation about SALAs beyond their dating practices. The facial expression of a young woman sitting in the front row left me in no doubt of her displeasure. She then backed this up with a comment audible enough for me to hear, "Dr. Marsh is throwing shade." I hurriedly tried to clarify my comments by explaining that my goal on the three-person panel, as it had been throughout my academic career, was to add sociological context and texture to this demographic group, while acknowledging that dating among the Love Jones Cohort is an important topic. My research has not always been well received by those in the Black community and/or those who are pro-marriage, regardless of race or ethnicity. Some interpret my research as suggesting that young Black adults, especially women, should neither marry nor have children. To make it clear, I am neither anti-marriage nor anti-children. I am simply reporting demographic data, incorporating personal narratives from the Love Jones cohort, and inserting several systemic factors into the conversation. I have presented data and findings on SALAs and the Love Jones cohort in various contexts, including conferences, media interviews, and podcasts, and on occasion have been met with angry responses, whether in person or by email. Responses range from, "Dr. Marsh, you are bringing down the Black race by not promoting the Black family, Black marriages, and Black love," to, "Dr. Marsh, you are a bitter single Black woman and a man-hater." Conference presentations include, but are not limited to, American Sociological Association, Population Association of America, Association of Black Sociologists. Media appearances include, but are not limited to, CNN, The Washington Post, and National Public Radio. It should be noted that not all the responses are negative, and that many people express enjoyment of my research. Years ago, a supporter lightheartedly nicknamed me Dr. Love Jones. These interactions demonstrate how the issue of dating among SALAs can be an emotive topic. Consequently, it can often feel like a balancing act having to juggle some people's desire to discuss why are Black women not getting married with my intellectual curiosity to move beyond such a question. My overarching desire is to advance a more robust structural understanding of this demographic group, as well as their presence and lifestyle in the Black middle class. This book represents my commitment to doing just this, while at the same time maintaining the delicate balancing act such an endeavor requires. Next, I offer a cursory profile of the members of the Love Jones cohort. Introduction. This sociological study centers on the Love Jones cohort, revealing the ways in which this demographic group live their lives. The term Love Jones cohort originates from the movie Love Jones and incorporates the common demographic term cohort, which refers to a band of people or those treated as a group. This movie celebrated its 25th anniversary in 2022. The characters in the Love Jones movie are young, educated Black professionals who have never been married, are child-free, and live alone, or with unmarried, non-romantic friends. The Love Jones cohort, single and living alone in the Black middle class, focuses on the lifestyles of those within the Black middle class who are SALA, single and living alone, and how their single status shapes their decision-making processes. While much has been written about both the Black middle class and the rise in singlehood, this book represents a first foray into bridging these two concepts. Put another way, as a sociologist and demographer who has published quantitative scholarship on this topic, the Love Jones cohort, single and living alone in the Black middle class, puts metaphorical meat on the numerical bones that I have published over the years. In doing so, it provides a more nuanced understanding of how intersecting social identities, coupled with social structures, shape 5 central lifestyle factors of the Love Jones cohort. 1. Defining family and friends, and deciding on whether and how to pursue romantic relationships. 2. Articulating the ebbs and flows of being Black and middle class. 3. Selecting where to live and why. 4. Accumulating and disseminating wealth. And 5. Maintaining overall health and well-being. For this study, 62 Black adults were interviewed over the course of summer 2015, 43 of whom were women and 19 men. Ages ranged from 25 to 56, with the mean average age being 38. Although women dominated those interviewed, I made the intellectual decision to fashion this book around single Black middle-class adults living alone, including both women and men. Where possible, I highlight age and gender differences. In 2019, I attended a 3-day retirement symposium for William Julius Wilson. Wilson is a well-decorated sociologist and Harvard University professor emeritus. Social scientists have polarized views of Wilson, with some considering him revolutionary and others viewing him as controversial and conservative. The timing, with fall semester having just started at the University of Maryland, could not have been worse for me to travel to Harvard for the event. In addition to my regular responsibilities as a professor, I was in the middle of grappling with the "so what?" question of this book, training police officers at the Prince George's County Police Department, who patrol one of the wealthiest black counties in the country, on understanding implicit bias, and immersing myself in the golf culture by volunteering at Enterprise Golf Course, also in Prince George's County, in order to help conceptualize a research project on how black golfers navigate racism, sexism, and classism on the golf course. However, I decided to attend Wilson's retirement symposium because his scholarship, as well as that of many of his students, were and continue to be essential to my research agenda on the black middle class. On the final day of the retirement symposium, Wilson clearly, concisely, and with great passion reiterated the premise of his widely popular 1978 text, The Declining Significance of Race. According to Wilson, the book's title garnered more attention than the actual arguments laid out within, prompting conservatives to sing the book's praises and liberals to rebuke it with stinging criticism. However, as Wilson pointed out, once people got around to reading the book, it came under heavy criticism from conservatives, in part due to his emphasis on structural impediments, while liberals gave it an enthusiastic thumbs up. As he retired from 6 decades of scholarship, Wilson wanted to state for the record the theoretical assumptions underpinning his book, attempting once and for all to silence his critics by leaving no room for ambiguity. In doing so, Wilson noted that he made 2 distinct arguments in his book, a class-based argument and a politically driven assertion. For the political assertion, Wilson asserts that the center of racial conflict and tension has shifted from the economic sector, which characterized American race relations throughout most of our history, to the social-political order. Wilson goes on to state that racial tensions and a manifestation of racism are products of situations, economic situations, political situations, social situations. In previous years, the situations creating racial tensions and conflict were concentrated in the economic sector. Today, they are featured in the political sphere and in social situations involving housing, schooling, criminal justice, and, most recently, immigration. Wilson ended this section of his symposium speech by emphatically noting that these were the arguments he was making in 1978 when The Declining Significance of Race was published. Wilson spoke passionately about the class-based argument in his closing salutation to the discipline, claiming, "Economic class has become more important than race and determines the life trajectory of black individuals, which helps to explain the growth of the black middle class and the increasing divide between the haves and the have-nots in the black community." For a complete narrative of Wilson's retirement reflects, visit the Hutchins Center for African and African American Research at Harvard University. Listening to Wilson, I remembered 2 pivotal arguments advanced by my colleagues. First, in an interview conducted for the Washington Center for Equitable Growth in 2017, Duke professor and economist, and my mentor, co-author, and friend, William Sandy Darity Jr., notes, "The core of stratification economics offers a structural, rather than a behavioral explanation for economic inequality between socially identified groups. Stratification economics goes against the grain of trying to argue that the kinds of differences that we observe and economic outcomes are attributable to cultural practices or some forms of dysfunctional behavior on the part of the group that's in the relatively inferior position. Economists and other social scientists must look at social structures and policies to really explain why those differences exist." Second, in the opening lines of the 2015 Annual Review of Sociology article, distinguished University of Maryland professor emerita Patricia and author of the often cited black feminist thought Hill Collins illuminates the interdependent concerns of intersectionality as a field of study, analytical strategy, and/or critical praxis. The term intersectionality references the critical insight that race, class, gender, sexuality, ethnicity, nation, ability, and age operate not as unitary, mutually exclusive entities, but rather as reciprocally constructing phenomena. It was at this point that I truly understood the sociological significance of this book. The manuscript draws on the Love Jones Cohort's intersecting identities to highlight how structural impediments, social structures, policies, and practices shape their existence, emergence, acceptance, and inclusion as a lifestyle and family within the larger Black middle class. In 2012, a popular text by sociologist Eric Klinenberg entitled Going Solo: The Extraordinary Rise and Surprising Appeal of Living Alone was published, in which the author addresses the well-documented rise in singlehood as a social change, not a social problem. In particular, Klinenberg finds that only a small percentage of his living alone respondents are isolated or lonely. Even so, Klinenberg does not draw much attention to any specific race or class dimensions. Meanwhile, in 2019, sociologist Eliakim Kislev published a book examining the emotional well-being of singlehood, entitled Happy Singlehood: The Rising Acceptance and Celebration of Solo Living. Kislev studies the levels of happiness of people who have been married versus those who never married, and how the aging process influences the latter's acceptance of their relationship status. In doing so, he suggests that, as they age, the never-married emerge as happiest, due in part to their ability to build solid friendship networks over time. Just a month following publication of Kislev's book, I joined friends on a spring break trip to Jerusalem, where Kislev resides. Always up for an opportunity to discuss singlehood, I sent Kislev an email a few days before leaving the States, and upon receiving a warm response, I arranged to meet him in downtown Jerusalem. The pending meeting made me mildly nervous, as I was concerned the criticism I was planning on leveling at his book, The Omission of Race, might not be well received. Yet the conversation was refreshing, bouncing around from critique to future collaborations, back to criticisms, to laughter, and to long periods of silence, signaling our intense thinking. We walked away from this meeting acknowledging that singlehood might look differently for Black people in countries where they do not form the majority, globally and in the U.S., compared to the dominant group, in this case, white people. I capitalize Black, but not white. My rationale stems from that put forth by the Associated Press, AP. In September 2020, AP changed its usage rules by capitalizing Black when discussing race and culture, while choosing not to do the same for whites. Their rationale was that white people in general have much less shared history and culture, and do not have the experience of being discriminated against because of their skin color. These racial differences are due in large part to structural factors. In 2011, to these two groundbreaking books on singlehood making waves in the academic and commercial worlds, Kate Bolick, later the author of a 2015 book on singlehood, wrote a piece for The Atlantic titled All the Single Ladies. Named after Beyoncé's song Single Ladies, Put a Ring on It. In the article, Bolick states, "Recent years have seen an explosion of male joblessness and a steep decline in men's life prospects that have disrupted the romantic market in ways that narrow a marriage-minded woman's options. Increasingly, her choice is between deadbeats, whose numbers are rising, and playboys, whose power is growing. But this strange state of affairs also presents an opportunity. As the economy evolves, it's time to embrace new ideas about romance and family, and to acknowledge the end of traditional marriage as society's highest ideal." The undercurrent of the article seems to suggest that white single women are choosing to be single by embracing an ideology that values emotional fulfillment above all else and the elevation of independence over coupling. By contrast, the Love Jones Cohort considers how racism, discrimination, and gender racism make it less clear whether singlehood among Black people especially Black women, is by choice or circumstance. In 1987, sociologist Bart Landry wrote his seminal book, The New Black Middle Class. In his study, Landry asserts that Black women's best option for financial stability and reaching middle-class status is marrying and joining the labor market outside the home alongside their working husbands. Landry assumes the association between marriage and middle-class status as necessary for the economic stability of the Black middle class. The Love Jones Cohort provides counter-evidence to some of Landry's earlier claims by asserting that a subset of Black SALA households have solid incomes, degrees, occupations, assets, are child and spouse free, and count themselves as members of the Black middle class. Collectively, these theoretical frameworks, assertions, and arguments help shape the premise of this book. Given the anti-Black sentiment that exists in social institutions, as well as structural forces, systematic inequalities, institutional racism, gendered racism, and stratification, the reasons for singlehood can be different for Black people compared to other racial or ethnic groups. Thus, the resulting overarching theme of the Love Jones Cohort is to investigate the lifestyles and distinctiveness of Black women and men who are both SALA and in the Black middle class. The term gendered racism was coined by critical race, gender, and leadership scholar Philomena Essed, and refers to the notion that racism is gendered in ways that mean the everyday lives of Black women and men are impacted differently. Although not exhaustive, other evolving terms, concepts, frameworks, or analytical tools related to intersectionality and gendered racism include structural gendered racism, the totality of interconnectedness between structural racism and structural sexism in shaping race and gender inequities, gendered anti-Blackness belonging, the institutionalized ideologies and everyday practices that structurally place African-descendant women as out of place and other or non-human, against which whiteness is measured as structurally in place and normative. Structural intersectionality, the consequences of multiple systems of oppression involving systematic subordination and exclusion of marginalized groups with respect to resources, opportunities, and freedoms in major social institutions. New Jane Crow draws from the term Jane Crow by Pauli Murray and symbolizes the connection between the blatant disregard of civil liberties and constitutional protections of African Americans during the post-Reconstruction period and the current plight of women. Misogynoir describes the ways anti-Black and misogynistic representation shape broader ideas about Black women, particularly in visual culture and digital spaces. Double Jeopardy, to address the dual oppressions of racism and sexism that continue to disenfranchise Black women. In writing this book, I grappled with whether to use the term SALA to refer to Black women and men who are single and living alone, or instead utilize SOLO, which is more often used in the U.S. media when naming the general population of singles. Ultimately, I decided to use SALA for two key reasons. First, the experiences of Black people are different from the general U.S. population. Conflating the two terms essentially collapses the experiences of Black communities into a white framework, discounting the effects of institutional racism and systematic inequalities faced by Black Americans. Second, Black SALAs have traversed singlehood for decades and, percentage-wise, started outpacing their white counterparts in 1960, a racial gap that has widened in every decade since. Specifically, at the start of the 20th century, 16% of Black adults and 20% of white adults had never been married. By 1960, there was racial crossover, and by 2019, 45% of Black adults had never married compared to 24% of their white counterparts. Changing SALA to SOLO dilutes these demographic shifts, potentially undermining the path Black SALA pioneers may have paved for the SOLO generation. From its inception, feminism excluded Black women. One response led to Sojourner Truth to demand, "Ain't I a woman?" in a speech in 1851, delivered at the Women's Rights Conventions in Akron, Ohio. Another response was Black feminist thought by Patricia Hill Collins in 1990. The Love Jones Cohort single and living alone in the black middle class represents a similar type of response to singlehood. The singlehood movement.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?